It's George. Did I wake you?
Most horror stories nowadays go for the gore or the jump scare and hardly touch upon the idea of what's real and what's actually an imaginary creation of the mind. CBS's psychological horror perfectly blends the constant tug-of-war between faith and skepticism. But it doesn't hold back in showcasing the demons of society as real demons with the beautifully designed monstrous beings who are surely going to remain in your head after you have seen them once. Each creature becomes a part of an ensemble of the most terrifying entities to be put on screen. But one of these creatures that haunts Kristen goes beyond the mere idea of a Demon of the Week format by breaking several rules and haunting both the viewers and the characters. Who is this demon? His name is George. Yeah, that's literally his name. So let's take a deep dive into George, the sleep paralysis demon, and figure out whether he is real or just a figment of Kristen's fractured mind, and maybe things will get interesting there. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Meet George. Say hello to George, a demon who shouldn't be associated with his name, because George isn't your next-door neighbor, but more like nightmare fuel, even though those two don't go together at all. Amongst the wide variety of demons we witness in the Evil series, not that the series is evil itself, but I was just referring to its title, George stands out amongst the wide variety of demons in the series due to his rather unexpected personality. From the first time you witness this demon terrorizing Kristen Bouchard, it is obvious that this one will stick around for a while. Most other demons might be interested in communicating through various growls and ominous whispers. Still, George is a gentleman and prefers to have a proper chat. And yeah, that's enough to creep someone out, considering George uses his conversational skills to indicate his twisted sense of humor and make his interactions even more disturbing than other such demons. Despite that, he also has the pre-existing conditions required for the horror a demon might exhibit in terms of the character design, with a monstrous figure that strikes fear. George's story. George appears in the Genesis 1 episode, and right away, we are hooked into the arc of this particular demon and its habits associated with the character of Kristen Bouchard. The introduction is nightmare fuel in itself, as the demon creeps right into Kristen's dream and then mocks her and manages to cause much psychological disturbance by going deeper into her personal space. But the real manipulative part comes into play when he goes and urinates in the corner of her bedroom, only to reveal that this liquid was just water from a leaky window, thus setting the tone for a game of fear and distorting the reality for its victim. But George goes one step beyond all these characteristics by presenting the enigma of being real or just a figment of Kristen's subconscious. Even though Kristen is a psychologist, she tries to rationalize this demon, George, who proves to go beyond her means of putting him down and continues to torment her by bringing in some close reflections from her real-life horrors she is facing in her job and personal life. How real can George get? Well, there's the time when he cut off Kristen's fingers in one of her dreams and thus mimicked the very questions that she had given the serial killer Orson LaRue during his psychological evaluation. So, the more George starts playing such games, the more Kristen starts questioning her sanity, which is a classic trope of horror. But here, it's executed masterfully. After a while, things go beyond the ordinary spooky level when George pops up, upside down on Kristen's ceiling with his eerie voice. It becomes clear that he isn't just another sleep paralysis demon, but something a lot more sinister, since he knows a lot more about her past. including her insecurities and even her unspoken desires. George digs deeper into these elements of her and thus manages to pull out something very personal and insidious. But Kristen isn't going to give up this easy. She plans things out and decides to challenge George by putting up a note on her ceiling, and when she couldn't read it in her dream, it becomes clear to her that George is just a mental construct and not a major danger to her. Now, she gets furious about his continuous presence and how it has affected her personal and professional life. During a particular act of defiance, she ends up stabbing him with a kitchen knife. Yes, this moment is one of the series' most game-changing yet satisfying sequences, because George appears to be mortally wounded during that scene. The audience is shocked and wonders if there's a chance that a demon can be hurt in this manner, thus making it rather easy to kill him. George is probably the first demon to bring these questions to one's mind because of this odd behavior, and we can't not mention when he broke the fourth wall. Yes, he addressed the audience during one sequence. And it's right then that we realize that George is no ordinary demon, and he won't be going away anytime soon. What's a sleep paralysis demon? The origins of George. While it would be difficult to trace the particular aspects of George that make him a haunting figure from the series, the idea of him being a demon is very common in various cultures. A sleep paralysis demon is something that has been a phenomenon haunting human sleep for centuries. Imagine you are laying in your bed, half awake, and suddenly you feel like you cannot move at all, and there's a sudden weight on your chest that pushes it down, and when you look towards it, a shadowy figure looms over you with malice. This is the classic rendition of the first interaction with a sleep paralysis demon. It has been scientifically explored as a neurological glitch that happens right when transitioning between REM sleep and wakefulness. Still, nothing more has been understood about this phenomenon. Meanwhile, the terror that it brings has been something that has been looked into from a cultural point of view across the world, with various stories and other nocturnal elements being referenced. While we sleep in REM, our brains induce muscle atonia, like a temporary paralysis that prevents us from acting out our dreams. But there are times when our brain wakes up before this paralysis could wear off, and it's right at this liminal state that our mind struggles to differentiate the waking reality filled with dream imagery from a realistic to a dreamlike state of mind. Our brain ends up projecting visions of creatures, which can often be rather terrifying, and the fear center of our brain, the amygdala, is particularly active during this time and ensures that the visions are rather haunting and intense. As an evolutionary trait, since our ancestors were in surroundings where there was always a predatory threat, the brain ends up conjuring images of a humanoid presence at a time of such uncertainty. But then, different cultures picked up on this phenomenon and gave us varying names of demons who are there for a specific purpose, rather than just to haunt us. For example, in medieval Europe, this demon is known as the incubus or the succubus, based on male or female, respectively, and they are supposed to be sitting on our chest at these times and drain our energy to engage in some sort of sinister seduction. However, other cultures looked at different aspects of it, as Japan calls it the kanashibari, meaning bound in metal, referencing the paralysis that the phenomenon occurs in. However, Mexico and Korea go for a more creepy association, as they associate it with more gruesome events. In Korea, it is known as the hawinulia, that translates to being squeezed by scissors. While in Mexico, taking it to a more sinister corner, it is associated with the phrase "se me subió el muerto," which means a dead body climbed on me, referencing the eerie weight the phenomenon creates on one's chest. You will notice that even though the phenomenon is similar, the different cultures have unique ways of interpreting the event and associating it with something particular to the individual. George is the version that we get to see in the series, and it becomes quite clear that he is the result of a lot more than just sleep paralysis when it comes to Kristen, because he appears at a time when she is questioning the reality of the events surrounding her, particularly the supernatural angle. The supernatural abilities. In terms of the normal demon-like abilities, one can count on that great speed that he shows as he manages to move without much trouble, while at the same time, he can defy gravity by crawling on the ceiling. But the one thing that would count as a specifically horrifying ability with regards to George is the idea of him confusing his victims as a demon who defies reality. George manages to be a riddle in a nightmarish form as he slithers in and out of the real and imaginary setting with a lot of ease. While most other demons stick to one specific setting to scare their victims, George goes out of the textbook case of a sleep paralysis demon to haunt Kristen. Kristen starts wondering if he is a figment of her imagination when she stumbles upon a character from the TV show her daughter watches who looks eerily similar to George. Could this be where her daughter claimed to see the creature herself, or is this just the image from which her mind created this character that haunts her? But it soon turns out there's more to this than just a character, because the prop master explains that the character came to him in dreams. Now, Kristen feels that she is not the only one haunted by the nightmarish creature, and this haunting demon has more victims. Ultimately, it refers to the wider network of demons that Orson LaRue mentions about George. However, this source could be a bit dodgy, considering LaRue was feeding her with her fears rather than giving him something new to deal with, something that became very clear in the end. So, in terms of power, I would say George clearly has the ability to exist in the gaps between the real and the dream, something very similar to the state that Kristen is in when she first witnesses him. The haunting appearance. Now, let's jump into the final factor that truly adds to the character's potential, making George one of the scariest things to look back at you from the series: the physical appearance. It won't be surprising to mention that the series already puts the fear inside us with the amazing character designs for these demons. I started wondering about the demons being a cross between Guillermo del Toro's and Shinigami's design from Death Note. But if you want to go for a more specific note, then one can see that the character design, in particular that of George, is a masterclass in blending various elements of supernatural entities to deliver a chilling presence. The emaciated look goes right back to the depictions of the Wendigo, the creature from the Algonquin folklore, having a skeletal body and known for its insatiable hunger for human flesh. This skeletal appearance is highly observable in George, and his unnatural thinness makes one wonder if he is barely clinging to a physical form. However, some features help George stray away from these features, with the characteristics particularly reminiscent of the shadow people, who are also associated with sleep paralysis amongst various hauntings. The jet black skin allows him to blend into the shadows, while simultaneously complementing his glowing green eyes, the first thing his victims notice about him during his visits. One might think that this particular demon looks eerily familiar because of this character design, and yet the character design entirely ensures that it remains distinctly original. The long, talon-like claws mirror the hand designs of some of the most typical demons and spirits in mythologies, particularly the Jersey Devil or even the elongated hands of the teenage sensation Slender Man. One might recall another horror franchise when looking at his sharp, crooked teeth, since Pazuzu from The Exorcist has a similar grin. All these features add to the existing creepy aspect of the character and thus end up making him a lot more menacing than we consider him to be. But one of the coolest design aspects is the tufts of black fur-like hair that could be seen on his head, lower back, and even the groin area. Yeah, that just goes into a new territory with a primal look in Leagues and the imagery associated with hellhounds, lycanthropic creatures, and other goat-like demons in folklore. Much like the Krampus, you see. While the female counterpart seems to have a tail, George lacks that feature, which benefits him by giving him a more humanoid shape, thus reinforcing that strong shadow people vibe amongst other humanoid horrors. One has to credit the creators repeatedly for creating these haunting characters that literally come out of the series with their liveliness. The idea that it's more on the eyes, as those are the first things you see in the darkness, preying on the fear of the unknown, is absolutely brilliant and points towards how the devil hooks you right in. Marty Matolis might be playing most of the demons, but he still manages to bring a unique flair to them with some of his gestures. A terrifying, almost human movement pattern makes George stand out from the other demons. Finally, we have to say that practical effects with digital enhancements done in the post shape the character further and bring another dimension to the character. Ewan Morton's voice work provides the eerie, otherworldly tone that expands over the visual entity and thus makes his presence linger in one's mind long after the scene ends. While most such horror characters depend on jump scares, George walking around is enough to give you nightmares and disturb you for a long time. Marvelous verdict. No wonder Stephen King wanted a reboot for the series following the ending in 2024, considering George is something that King himself might create. In fact, evil managed to seep into this thin line between what's real and what haunts an individual out of their guilt, and thus became a rather iconic series. And George, well, George is a brilliantly executed character that clearly has more tricks up his sleeves that deserve to be showcased. It's time that we got another chance to visit George and probably take a look into the demonic underworld and their network. Something like the society that John Wick works in, but more with horrifying tropes-breaking monsters instead of just ruthless, good-looking killers. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, and stay safe out there. Thanks, everyone.